Our panel is about the art of anticipation. We were having a light debate about what that means backstage. But it's all about basically knowing your customers, your clients well enough, anticipating their needs. There is some daylight between AB InBev and BlackRock and Citigroup. So maybe a productive way to start would be just defining who you see as your customers, as your clients. Nick, let's start with you.
Well, first, good morning. Thank you for having me. So at AB InBev, we serve millions of retailers around the world, many of them small and medium-sized retailers outside of the United States. And we use technology to connect to them in a platform we call Bees. This is our proprietary digital e-commerce platform. It enables us to connect with those small and medium retailers and bridge not only a digital inclusion gap, but a financial inclusion gap.
All right. Mark, take it away.
Oh, great to be here, and thank you for the invite. I'll try to be as concise as Nick was there. You know, BlackRock is a very young company, but grew very successfully with a very simple mission, which was to help more and more people experience financial well-being. So at our core, we are an asset manager, but we're a B2B asset manager. So we've always essentially worked through our institutional clients to the end client. And so, you know, whether that's 25 million Americans who are saving for retirement, we manage the pool of funds that create that pension plan. And so we count our clients as the biggest institutions in the world, from sovereign wealth funds to public pension plans to university endowments. And then on our wealth side, we partner with guys like Citibank as they seek to serve their clients by basically providing the building blocks through things like ETFs, that allow people to get access to investment capabilities and investment products, and that allows them to build those retirement savings for the future.
First of all, I had COVID 3 weeks ago, so you're pretty safe.
Okay,
Sitting
cool.
next
You're
to
definitely safe.
Yeah. I run the Wealth at Work at Citi in the Wealth section, and what that means for all of you is that when you are a private company and you are a law firm or a professional services, you enter that market right out of a great school. You make a lot of money, and then you continue to make a lot of money. You tend to be really busy and pay very little attention to what you do. So our clients are all of those busy professionals from entry point all the way to managing partners and then retiring, who need total wealth management, whether that is investment, lending, commodity items like banking, and that is who we see as our clients.
And you were actually quoted in a Bloomberg article in August saying that we get them young and we keep them. I thought that was pretty funny. I liked that. So I guess so much of, you know, knowing your clients is actually interacting with them. And again, to come back to COVID, we've been living in a pandemic for about 3 years now. So it's hard to have that conversation without acknowledging that. Over the past 3 years, how is the mode of interaction, and especially the first interaction, how has that changed?
I'd be happy to take that. For our business, it's really been a transformation from analog to digital. We serve millions of small retailers around the world, and many of their businesses still run on pen and paper. They still run in cash. And this is a very analog, physical business. And through technology and the launch of Bees, we've not only digitized our relationship with those clients, but we've digitized their businesses. This has enabled us to supplement our in-person interaction with them into a digital interaction, which enables us to know them better, know their businesses better, and open up many new avenues of communication and understanding them better and more deeply through data. So it's been a really dramatic transformation from analog to digital connection with our millions of retailers.
Take it away, Mark.
Take it away. You know, I think of COVID the last kind of 3 years as sort of like a kind of spring being tightened and tightened and tightened. And, you know, we all kind of, everyone is kind of, we can all remember where we were when the world started to kind of shut down as a result of this. And, you know, as a financial services company, it meant that we, you know, created kind of 18,000 home offices almost overnight, and then started to, you know, interact with our clients on a very proactive basis. And I think, like everyone, we were kind of surprised at the degree to which, you know, productivity levels and processes all kind of worked pretty smoothly. And there was this craving of sort of staying connected because you knew everyone was sitting in their, you know, their kitchen or their living room and sort of, you know, trying to find ways to connect. And so that spring got wound tighter and tighter and tighter. And what's been kind of amazing for us is just, you know, when you let the spring go, what then happens? I mean, the degree of almost emotional connectivity that's happening as we start to see clients again in person is quite extraordinary. I mean, I find myself, it's like you almost, when you see somebody, you're like, wait, we've like spoken 6 times but never met, is really quite extraordinary. So I think, look, I think the world is kind of suffering a sort of quiet PTSD here, that as people sort of try to figure out, you know, hybrid models, not hybrid models, 3 and 2, 4 and 1, you know, all of this kind of thing. You know, for us, that's still very much a work in progress because we're trying to be respectful of the fact that, you know, first of all, the world is not completely out of this, so there's still differences regionally. Secondly, that, you know, you have different businesses within your business. We have a huge technology platform, and they're different in how they want to kind of be back in the office. But we fundamentally believe that at the end of the day, that we all have to get back together. That's what the human condition is about. We are pack animals at heart, and we love the interaction we have with our colleagues. And so I think ultimately that's how we will move. And I think then we sort of revert back to a lot of in-person, but being much more receptive to kind of the hybrid model as we go forward.
We're not lone wolves. Has that been your experience as well?
Pretty much the same. So I won't repeat all of what was said, but I will tell you that it was amazing when you went to Zoom, a lot of Zoom with your clients. You actually got to know your clients in ways that you didn't know them before. They were in their homes, they were seeing dogs, kids, you know, all. And it created a type of conversation, sometimes deeper than you would if you were just sitting at a lunch or you were sitting in their office, and so they were in their office mode. And I do believe that a good banker has been able to carry that, you know, into after Zoom life. I do agree that within the last 6 months, everybody was almost zoomed out. You were tired of having one after another. So we're welcoming the concept of getting in front of clients. But there is a tendency to want to do Zoom because it was easier, right? So you have to push both your employees and your clients to get together. We do think relationships are more solid. Conversations are a lot more real when you are in person with people.
So I feel like this is where the daylight between your industry and your two's industry is coming out, because obviously your client's very comfortable with that digital world. But Nick, to your point that it was the transition from analog to digital, tell us a little bit about the growing pains there.
Well, at first we weren't sure if our retailers would embrace technology as a way of interacting with us. But what we found very early was that they preferred it. So we learned that our retailers preferred to interact with us sometimes in times we weren't serving them. So in the past, we would physically visit these retailers, as many B2B companies do. But now we interact with them digitally, and we find that nearly half of our retailers prefer to interact with us outside of normal business hours. So there was an immediate acceptance and take-up from our clients in interacting with us this way. But we also learned that this opened new opportunities for us. They also asked us to start serving them with not only AB InBev products, but they wanted to order other products through our platform. So we now have more than 200 partners that work with us in our marketplace e-commerce platform. And we've generated a business of nearly $1 billion of net revenue as a result. So we found that there was great acceptance from our retailers, but it wasn't all straightforward. We launched this year in Tanzania and Uganda.
Wow.
And in these markets, the availability of bandwidth and the cost of bandwidth is far more limited compared to many other markets. And so we had to tailor our offerings. We had to know our customers very deeply and meet them where they are, localizing our approach to their reality. And in Africa, that means adjusting our offering to be less intense for bandwidth. So we found great new opportunities for growth through this digital connection. We found a way to better serve our clients increasing our Net Promoter Score by more than 10 points over the last couple of years. But we've also had to be very thoughtful about knowing our clients locally and adapting to their reality.
So also a moderator no-no, I didn't remind the audience, you can submit questions. I believe you scanned a QR code when you came in here, so feel free to do that. But so this transition to analog to digital, you walked us through some of the growing pains. I want to talk about some of the growing pains that you all are feeling now. Mark made the great point that we're still in this pandemic. A lot of companies are trying to figure out 4 or 1 day or 2 or 3 or what that actually looks like in terms of in the office. I mean, I'm speaking as a millennial. I love the hybrid setup. I mean, that has been the majority, not the majority, but the good half of my career. I unfortunately spent a lot of time on TikTok. I know Gen Z is never going into the office. And as we look forward to, you know, a future where we are trying to figure out, hopefully in our post-pandemic world, what that looks like, do you anticipate trying to revert back to, you know, primarily in person, or is this Zoom hybrid reality the future?
I think, you know, I think the answer is it's kind of both, right? I mean, it really does depend, and we were talking earlier on about how, you know, if you look at the nature of different industries, they all have dynamics that are different. We have a massive technology business, and so that has a different component to it. But, you know, I think the things that we perhaps haven't talked about, and maybe financial services has a kind of unique lens onto this, is like, you know, we're living through pretty unprecedented times in the world, you know, whether it's kind of supply chain issues, wars in the war in Ukraine, inflation. And again, the question here is, you know, a high-performing team can perform at a high level for a long time remotely. But when it comes to things like problem solving, when it comes to things like, you know, getting the right, you know, brains together to work on a problem and try and solve it, I just still see that it's kind of happens together. You know, the fact of the matter is, I doubt Zoom was invented on Zoom, right? So it's all about getting people together to sort of problem solve. And I think, again, we're very fortunate in financial services because we actually didn't have, you know, folks on the ground manufacturing or delivering or, you know, part of the sort of supply chain. And so we were able to be remote much more easily. But I think we shouldn't kid ourselves that if we think that's the new normal, then I think we miss that opportunity to really create the connectivity. And this whole thing of the art of anticipation, I mean, that's what our clients mandate us to do, is like try to anticipate what's going to happen. What's the Fed's next move going to be? How are we going to think about inflation? What's going to be, you know, the equity stories we need to talk about? And those just don't happen when everyone is kind of remote.
I will say, as a reporter, it's difficult to get the Pentagon Papers over Zoom. But I mean, in your business, where you're actually trying to court the younger, soon-to-be, hopefully very wealthy part of your business, and how do you anticipate the next decade looking there?
I think hybrid is the future, honestly. I don't think you're going to be able to go back to an all in the office. My generation grew up like that. That is how we learned from each other. And I do think there's 2 things to it. One is our bankers, our staff learning to become better at their jobs. And for that, some level of learning from each other is really important. And it's really hard to do that on Zoom. Sometimes you learn about how you position a situation by listening to somebody else around you say it. You lose that in Zoom. You just don't have that ability. I can even tell you the professional services we serve say that that's their biggest issue with their younger employees as well, because everybody thinks, well, I did my job while I was remote, so why do I need to come to the office? Yes, perhaps you did, but how much is it that you didn't learn because you weren't listening to somebody who's done this for 5 years, 10 years that you're missing? So I think what we're trying to do is meet the client where they want us to meet them. I will say the last 2 years of COVID in terms of digital has clearly said to us we have to become better at serving digitally. We need to serve the client if they want to connect to us at midnight, and that might mean digital, not a human being. But we also need to be able to do it at their location, in their office, or on Zoom if they so choose. So being able to do that, and Citi, made a decision very, very early on, unlike some other financial institutions, that we were going to go the hybrid route. So far, it's worked. Let's see if it continues to work for us. So.
That does sound very dark if someone contacted me at midnight, unless it was Taylor Swift.
Online, not
Mark brought up supply chains, which is kind of catnip for me. I report on cross-asset markets for Bloomberg News. And I mean, I gotta ask, are we past peak supply chain? When can we stop talking about this as a buzzword?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. As the world's leading brewer, of course, we run a very global business that is very local as well. And we've seen over the past few years disruptions in the supply chain. I think that we're very proud of our advanced data and analytics capabilities that enabled us to weather this storm and plan better throughout these supply chain disruptions. Of course, it's something that we continue to work on and monitor. But I think we're very happy with how our business is positioned today.
Well, that folds nicely into what I want to talk about, which is the Federal Reserve. We had a meeting yesterday, another 75 basis point hike. Soft landing is still a phrase you hear a lot in terms of what's going to happen to the economy. But we know that recession fears are growing. We know that inflation is hitting all segments of the economy right now. And I'm curious what you all are hearing from your clients in terms of that, and what past periods in recession have taught you about how the mode of interaction, how those communications changed. Naz, I'd love to start with you.
I think that clients themselves are trying to understand what it means to their industries in terms of what is happening. This is unlike any downturn we've seen in most of our living times, even those who are older. So what you are seeing is people learning as they're acting. So what do you have to do? And then again, I looked at the art of anticipation, is the concept of what is it that the client needs in front of them in the next few weeks, in the next few months. I'll be very honest, today our clients are quite nervous. The idea of investing long term, it's a daunting concept to them, whether they're around their retirement or young. So it's meeting them where they feel comfortable. If right now you feel that you want to keep money in cash till you feel more comfortable about it.
Yield's pretty juicy right now.
Yeah, you went from 0 to about 3% on a CD, right? Or a treasury at 3.5%. You might look at that. But long term, we all know that's not what you want to do. You want to be able to think long term and not time the market, if you would. So I do believe that we need to educate the client at the same time that we anticipate where the level of comfort is. They might be different than each other at the moment, and we have to help them. And frankly, they say the same thing to us. Professional services like consulting firms that are advising us tell us, get a little uncomfortable, because there might actually be an opportunity to innovate in a situation like this rather than sit and just answer the client the way they're ready to be answered.
And you have a pretty interesting perch because, again, you're dealing with young professionals. I would assume for most of them, this is their first full-blown recession, potentially, unless they, had some experience with the GFC.
Absolutely. And I think there's fear. A lot of them changed jobs in the last few years, right? We saw a lot of attrition in the millennial generation. So they're a little nervous about having changed jobs and being in a new company. But truthfully, there is absolutely opportunities. If you look at the recessions in the past, there has been opportunities to create new fields, create versions of jobs and businesses that didn't exist before. And even in a same field, to do it in a different way than done in the past, whether it's a law firm, a consulting firm, or an accounting firm. So we're seeing managing partners listen to their younger generation a little more, because they want to make sure that they're serving the client with understanding what the younger generation anticipates and wants from them.
And Mark, would you say there's that same level of anxiety among the clients that you serve?
Yeah, look, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The number one concern that every capital allocator or capital owner has at the moment is inflation. And the reality is that no one's experienced it for a very, very long time. So the consequences of inflation are so widespread. And of course, you know, you talked about the Fed, and it's like, yeah, but like the Fed didn't get it exactly right last year. So I mean, what necessarily gives us
transitory.
that the transitory word? We've not even mentioned it, but it's you know. So I think the question of the Fed will do what it has to do. Like I think you know the messages out of yesterday are kind of consistent with this kind of whatever it takes sort of mentality. And by the way, I think that's actually right. I actually worked part of my career in Turkey when they still had very high inflation, and it is extremely debilitating to an economy. It's extremely debilitating to people's finances, and it creates all the things that we were talking about in terms of uncertainty and fear of the future and so forth. And our frame of reference, of course, to yields is like, well, we've been used to 0. Now you can get like 3-4%. Like that sounds and feels good. But we're not seeing the other side of it, of course, which is that the cost of living is going up. Abilities to get mortgages. We've not even talked about the energy crisis that puts a whole different level of anxiety into the system. So I think the Fed is right to be laser-like focused on this, even if they didn't get it quite right last year. I think that let's cut them some slack to hopefully get it right this time. But I do think ultimately what we're going to see, and maybe I wouldn't time it, but I think ultimately we see things start to be deflationary again, because as things get sorted out on the supply chain side, Europe seems to have stockpiled energy to get through the winter and so forth. So I think we'll maybe start to see some deflationary pressures that hopefully then settle us back to whatever new normal looks like.
Well, you're a very generous man. I talk to a lot of people who are upset with the Fed right now. But Nick, I gotta say, I don't envy you. We already went through some of the supply chain challenges that you're dealing with. What has the conversation with your retailers been like when we think about this very high inflation? In the US, the hottest inflation in a generation. It's a similar picture around the world. What do those conversations sound like?
Yeah, I think inflation, of course, we're not immune from inflation as a business, and it has implications not only for our input costs, but we think a lot about our consumers, because ultimately consumers and their demand for our products is who we serve on a day-to-day basis. What we found is that beer is a very resilient category. So people like to have a beer. We talked a lot about Zoom. People used to have beers over Zoom. Thankfully, now they're having beers in person. So beer is a resilient category. We pay very close attention to our consumers, and so far we've seen very robust continued demand for our products. So we're very fortunate to be in such a resilient category. We also, as a global business, are not new to inflation. We have big businesses in Brazil, Argentina, South Africa, and so we feel well positioned to sort of navigate through the inflationary environment as a business.
So we have an interesting amount of time left, about 1 minute and 45 seconds. Let's do a lightning round really quick. I want to hear from each of you what you expect to be your biggest priority in 2023. Maybe in a year we can talk about how that changed, but Naz, let's start with you.
Talent, retention of talent.
Yeah.
Delivering income to our clients.
Love it.
I think for AB InBev, it will be to continue to lead and grow our category through this environment, being with our consumers. And for me personally, it will be to continue our digital transformation with our retailers, enabling our partners, more than 200 partners, to sell through our platform as a new business line for us.
That was actually the most efficient lightning round I've ever done. This has been great. Thank you guys so much, Nick, Mark, and Naz. I wish you all the best of luck in 2023, and thank you for taking the time to come hang out with us actually in person.